But what happens with the Allegro section is that there's again new changes. And there's only ever been two artistic directors of Canada's National Ballet School, Betty Oliphant and Mavis Staines. And during Betty Oliphant's tenure, there was this incredible laying of a foundation and the building of a reputation that then Mavis, of course, has been able to continue. And she took the school into new territory. She opened up new technical realms for the students, new ways of approaching teaching, so that she brought in people like Irene Dowd. She questioned the very traditional, proper, maybe a little bit restrained Cicchetti, and realized that in order for the students or the graduates of Canada's National Ballet School to be desired and even sought after by artistic directors, that they needed to actually develop a different level of skill, more dynamic use of space. And so Mavis really began to research what might that be, and of course she turned to the Vaganova tradition for part of that inspiration, but she also turned to Irene Dowd for assistance in how to work with those demands in a way that the students would be safe physically and be able to work, each one of them, with their own physical realities. And so you see here Mavis with a student, but also Irene Dowd with a student. And so I leave Mavis with some time. Perhaps the most exciting event or initiative that was undertaken almost immediately by Mavis and Bob was this understanding that the block of houses on Maitland Street, a beautiful heritage district, but the school had not only outgrown those facilities, but those facilities were really no longer suited to the needs of a school the size and the kinds of spaces that dancers need in order to really develop their skills. So it was understood that new space was necessary, and in the book, those of you who have read it or those of you who might read it, for me, it's such a wonderful, it's almost like a detective story or a very kind of Byzantine journey of how the school and Bob Sermon and the board of directors worked and worked and worked in order to, first of all, get the Jarvis Street site in the first place, and then after that to get funding through Superbuild and the government so that the Celia Franca Center was able to become a reality. And it was a decade, really, before that, or during that time that it took. So this was the Break Down the Wall ceremony in 2003 with Celia Franca joining Mavis Staines and Robert Sermon. It's a beautiful picture, and of course we all know the magnificent Celia Franca Center and the facilities that the students and all of us are able to enjoy. And I think I won't talk so much. I talked about my goals, I think. Some of the themes that emerged, always about space, always about money. But the other thing that is a thread through the school's history is its relationship with not only the international dance community, but with the Canadian dance community. It wasn't always a happy relationship. There were a few bumps along the road. So for example, in the very first years of the school, the Canadian Dance Teachers Association expressed concerns that there was a ballet division. There was an after-school program and a Saturday program, and actually it was a requirement for the school to have that initially because that kept the school in the black financially. It brought in money to have a recreational program. But you can understand that other dance teachers would be a little concerned. So there have been, points of conversation with the Canadian dance community. There have been other things, but I'm very happy that today, and it's actually been going on for a number of years, the relationship between Canada's National Ballet School and the local, the national, and the international dance communities is really quite wonderful. And you just have to be here any day of the week to see the number of people coming through the building, and the different populations that are able to enjoy the facilities here, that it's a wonderful opening of the school. It's not a secret what goes on here. We're not hiding. It's open and it's here for everyone. So I think on that front, I'm going to pass you over to Mavis. And
thank you, Norma Sue. Thank you. As I was listening to Norma Sue, I've decided to basically rewrite what it is that I had prepared for the past several days, because I think that potentially giving you a behind-the-scenes view in terms of my transition into the role as artistic director, and then what some of the program developments represent and the rationale behind them, might actually be the best way of spotlighting present and future. You feel like exactly the right group of people to share the reality that there was no one in my life as a youth and as a dancer more important than Betty Oliphant. And I think that the day that I walked into Betty's office and she asked me if I wanted to train to become the artistic director was a time where I recognized that, in fact, I had had a sense of the significance of Betty's role and what a brilliant job she was doing since I was about 13 and had first come to the school. I remember one day watching Betty run from one studio to the next, thinking, my goodness, she looks tired. I bet I can't even begin to imagine what it is that she has on her shoulders. And I was really blessed in being Betty's associate director for 5 years. The reality is that when I became artistic director after that period is, I think, best reflected in the classical Indian dance tradition. There was a period of time when I needed to build on Betty and Celia's remarkable legacy in a way that made it clear to Betty that there was a new chapter. So for 10 years, Betty and I didn't speak. But it was absolutely essential to me that I took every opportunity to honor and celebrate what a gift it was for me to take the school into the next phase of its development. I am not a pioneer in the way that Betty and Celia were pioneers, but it is a gift that I am grateful for daily, that Betty and Celia both recognized that I loved so much what they had created that I was absolutely going to champion those key values. So it was extremely meaningful when one of our board members, who is a great classical Indian dancer, asked me one day what my relationship was with Betty at that time. And I said, we're needing to go through a period of time where there's space. And she said, you know, I watched the two of you work closely together with Betty as the artistic advisor for your first 4 years as the artistic director. And she said, I was amazed because that never ever happens in India. She said, in India, there's an awareness that always, after an artist has been mentored, that at some point there is going to be a complete breakdown. It is the only way that you can hand on the torch. And you have to hope that you're given the gift of persevering for long enough so that there can be a coming back together in the relationship. So the fact that just before Betty passed away, I was able to spend an afternoon with her, and for us to be able to say to each other that we loved and admired each other as much on that day as the first day that I met her in Studio AB when I was auditioning. And that there had to be this space and separation, but that she was really, really proud and excited by the work that I was doing in tandem with so many talented people. I think in the same way it was hugely meaningful for me when, with people's help like Norma Sue Fisher, members of the board, that without taking anything away from Betty, we were able to talk about the relationship that Norma Sue described, in that Betty and Celia were extraordinary bookends for each other. Neither of them would have been able to accomplish what they did had they not been a team. And again, in the same way that Menaka Tekar talked about the break, there has to be a schism at a certain point. You see that in all really tight artistic creative relationships. But for this theater to be named for Betty, and for that extraordinary block of studios to be named for Celia, this for me is exactly the right way to honor the legacy of this school that I am blessed to this day to carry forward. In terms of my building on this legacy, there are so many times when I look at what I'm doing and I think this is a present day version of what Celia and Betty did, but it's in the present, looking forward from this point in time. And there are many, many occasions when daily I learn from students at the school, and I think, I wonder which one of them is next going to be carrying the torch of the school. And they have such brilliant ideas that I can only imagine where it is they're going to take it. And I hope that if it's my journey, that maybe I'll be on the planet and aware enough to be able to celebrate what it is that they're doing in the way that Celia and Betty celebrated the school's evolution to this point.